Hi everybody. This is the second in this short series of encouraging you how to find different ways of connecting with and worshipping with God, based on what Gary Thomas refers to as the 9 sacred pathways. So I gave you an intro last time and really appreciate that a good number of you listened to that. So I want to tackle the first 3 in my list briefly today. Just a reminder that each of these are just tools to help you and have to be tied in alongside reading or listening to God's written word through spending time in prayer and indeed listening to and, very importantly, obeying his voice and his response. So these are just tools to help you connect with God. And some of them you'll relate to and others you won't. There's no right, there's no wrong, there's no better or worse in any of these. So I'm going to kick off with my number one favourite, which is the described as the naturalist, the ones that love God out of doors, love God out in nature. I just love to explore God in amongst his creation. And I know that's probably common with a lot of people of my age and stage in life. Maybe we have a little bit more time to stop and smell the roses along the way, as it were. But it's not limited to us older folk. So anyway, so basically, a naturalist would love to leave the building, get outside, to pray, to be with God by a river, up a mountain, a lake, a forest, a green, or anywhere. It could be just looking and watching the insects as they work away and labour. Nature declares that God is. So I know from me, I've spent many times, as you know, walking or cycling up mountains. I tend to cry on the way up, but often I come down laughing and shouting praise and worshipping God because I meet with God in that place. I also had the privilege of visiting the Grand Canyon a while back, and the first time I saw it, it just totally took my breath away. And then I sat back and I watched other people approach the rim. And it was amazing. Each time they stepped back in awe and wonder. But as I looked out at the Grand Canyon, what I saw was this image of God just stretching out a finger, like we would draw in the sand. The other day I was drawing in the sand with Ezra, our grandson, and I saw God just draw his finger in the sand. And he says, "You think this is good? You haven't seen half of it. You haven't seen me." And we see that in the Psalms. David was a naturalist and a worshipper, and he declared God's glory. The big danger, of course, is that we end up worshipping the creation rather than the creator. And so we just need to stop and take time and ask God for inspiration. In fact, Lizzie's message last Friday was a classic example of being inspired by nature. She referred to this great oasis in the Kalahari. We took it to prayer on Wednesday night and discovered that God was saying something to us about being an oasis and drinking from him, who we drink from. Moving quickly on, the second one I've got is the sensate, the ones that love God with the senses. They want to be lost in the awe, beauty and splendour of God. You know, Ezekiel wrote these grand visions of God, these amazing pictures of God. John in Revelation chapter 4 had this immense vision of the presence of God. You know, as evangelical Christians, we've reacted to more traditional symbolic forms of worship and have confined ourselves to one corner of the room, when in fact God lives in a vast auditorium. Over the years, I've been keen to identify how we can develop this approach. We may think that we know what church sounds, feels and looks like, but have you ever asked yourself, what does it smell like or what does it taste like? My own first experience of worship in Africa was in a mud hut with a couple of hundred people that had already eaten goat stew and then danced and worshipped for an hour or more before I entered. There was an overwhelming aroma, as you can imagine, that hit me. And that always reminds me of the presence of God because miracles were taking place in that place. So whenever I hear African music, I smell the goat stew, the body odour, the hot, dry earth. It immediately fills my nostrils and I'm overwhelmed again by the presence of God. Again, we have to learn that we worship God through our conviction rather than just our emotion, and don't allow our senses to carry us away, but help us to point us to God. The third one I want to look at this morning is the traditionalists, those that love God through ritual and symbol. And again, I confess that tradition has often just irritated me. But as I've dug deeper into understanding why certain practices have been established over many hundreds of years, there is a real richness as we dig and deep, a symbolism. Throughout Scripture, there were altars and stones of remembrance that the Hebrew planted on their journey to remind them and to remind future generations of God's goodness. You know, so much of the Old Covenant is built around rituals and symbols because of the great power that is unleashed. You know, Joshua and the walls of Jericho came down because they remembered what God had done. You know, some of us put fridge magnets on the fridge or text on the shaving mirror, screensavers on their PCs, just to remind us what God's goodness and promises have done. So the important thing is that we don't just go through any of this as a ritual, that we come to God with sincere hearts seeking him. So there's three ways which, again, I just want to encourage you to think about and say, okay, is there something that I can explore in which to worship God? So right now I'm geared up with my winter clothing weather on, ready to go out and enjoy God in the countryside and the wind and the rain. Bless you guys. See you soon.